This is my official review of the Lume Pad 2. I can guarantee you one thing up front, which is that you're not going to find a more comprehensive, in-depth review of the Lume Pad 2 anywhere else, period. And the reason I waited so long to do my full review of the Lume Pad 2, even though I've had it for over 6 months and my whole channel focuses on 3D devices, 3D technology, 3D experiences, is because I just wanted to make sure I've experienced everything and I can give you a true review of this device that you're not going to find anywhere else. And now I'm confident that I've accomplished that. I've poured probably over 500 hours into using this tablet, all the different features, including all the brand new updates, so you have the most up-to-date, in-depth review of the Lume Pad 2 right here. In the review I'm also going to cover a ton of like hidden tricks and tips and things like that that aren't really obvious when you first get the Lume Pad 2. You're not going to find anybody else telling you these things. Some of the cool things that this tablet can do that aren't immediately obvious. So make sure to watch all the way to the end so you don't miss any of that stuff. If you think this type of technology is cool, definitely subscribe to my channel because this is what I do in all my videos. I cover 3D devices, 3D tech. There's going to be so many of them coming out in the near future, and I'm going to be covering all of them on this channel. So if you like that stuff, if you're interested, if you want to know what the future is going to be like, subscribe to my channel. Alright, so let's get right into the review. We're going to take a look at the hardware in a second, but before that I just want to say one thing, which is that if you're going to get a Lume Pad 2, I highly recommend getting the case. It's actually a beautiful case and it protects the tablet perfectly. One of the main reasons I think that you need it is because the rear camera is fairly exposed and I would be worried about damaging this, accidentally setting it down face down this way, or just walking around and having stuff come into contact with the lens. You could easily ruin it. If you have the case, you can rest assured that most of the time it's going to be very well protected. Here's the case. It's very light. It's got kind of this felty, fabricy feel on the inside, and the outside is more of this rubbery, firm material. It's very comfortable to hold on both sides. And the cool thing is, it's kind of like magnetic, so it'll snap right onto your tablet and fit snugly around that rear external camera. This folds right up to protect the camera completely. The awesome thing is that the case is also magnetic to itself, so it holds like this. I'm not holding the case like this, it's holding itself up, so it won't flop open. If you want to undo this, you just unsnap the external layer to fold it back down. You can cover up the front of the case that way, and then lay it down on this side. If you lay it down on the side with the rear camera when it's folded like this, it'll still protect it because the case is keeping the camera enough away from the surface that it's not going to come into contact with anything. If you're not sure if you have a super clean, safe surface to work with, I still highly recommend folding this up, snapping that like that, and then resting it down. This way you're pretty much guaranteeing that you're protecting the rear camera even when you're laying it down. The front camera is not as much of a problem. You don't have to worry too much because just like the front camera in most devices, it's covered by the display itself. You could lay this down with the display flat on the surface if you're sure it's soft enough. Otherwise, just fold it over. You could technically lay the tablet down this way on either side. Having this case on doesn't add too much weight to the tablet. To me, it feels light enough to use for pretty much any type of use case. The tablet itself weighs a couple of pounds, so it's not really well suited to just hold out in front of you and use for lengthy sessions that way. But if you're going to take photos like this with the case attached, I do this all the time. I just leave the case on, take photos. I hardly feel it. You can also fold it over. It's designed to fold up nicely like this, and then you can set it down. The case props it up at just the right angle so you can do anything on this without having to hold it. Overall, this case is super easy to use. It protects your tablet perfectly and it fits the dimensions perfectly. I recommend the case 100%. It's an amazing case. Now let's move on to the actual hardware of the Lume Pad 2. And it looks like this. It's got this kind of nice, sleek, black design and polished feel. I really love the design and the way it feels to hold. It feels super light without a case. Quite thin, but sturdy at the same time. There's literally zero compromise to the 2D resolution, and the quality of this 2D display is amazing. It looks great in normal 2D mode. You can swap back and forth between 2D and 3D when you're doing anything on this tablet. It uses a normal Android OS. As I just mentioned, you have the front camera, which is a stereo camera, so this takes 3D pictures and videos. The rear camera takes 3D pictures and videos, also stereo camera. The baseline is a bit wider for this rear one. I think it's about 30 millimeters. You can swap back and forth between 2D and 3D mode, toggle it on and off anytime with a single tap, so it's incredibly convenient. This display, just in general, is a really nice one. It looks great. It's 2.5K, 2560 by 1600 resolution, 12.4 inches, so it's a really nice sized tablet. I think this is the perfect size. It's 16 by 10 aspect ratio at 120 Hz, and the display is very bright too. Runs very nicely on Android 12. So of course it supports the Google Play Store. You could download any app from the Google Play Store just like on any other Android tablet. Doesn't have to be 3D. You can play whatever you want or use whatever normal 2D app. Perfectly functioning, really nice 2D tablet, even without all the 3D features that I'm about to talk about. And I use it all the time for regular 2D stuff like checking my mail, going on social media, Google Drive, whatever you want. It's a very capable 2D tablet. Runs on Snapdragon 888, so it's a bit outdated in terms of the processing power, which you might wonder if you really really feel when you're using this. There may be certain times or use cases I'll talk about where you will feel it, but most of the time, 90% of the time, you won't notice it at all. It's a very snappy, really easy to use, smooth experience on this tablet in 2D and 3D mode. But we all know the main killer feature of this tablet is the 3D. This 3D technology actually uses something different from what we've seen in other devices like the Nintendo 3DS. Even other glasses free 3D uses something different from this. This uses what is known as diffractive backlighting, and it's a proprietary nanotechnology that's integrated into a layer of this display by Leia Inc. And basically what it does is it uses a combination of the display technology with the head tracking that is built in. It tracks your head through the front camera as you're using it in 3D mode. It basically sends the light from two different images in different directions depending on where your head is positioned, so that the photons are delivered directly to both of your eyes in just the right direction, just the right angle, which results in having a really convincing, real-life feeling 3D image that you see on this tablet. Some of you might know that the Nintendo 3DS actually later implemented head tracking with their new Nintendo 3DS, which is, yes, literally the name of that handheld console. What that did is it showed you the 3D image. As you moved your head position, it would track you. But with this, you get that, of course. It's done at a higher level, so it's more responsive. You don't have as much jittering or stuttering as you move your head position, and the 3D angle adjusts rapidly to compensate or to keep up with your head position. This does a much better job than the Nintendo 3DS and other similar things that we've seen before. The other thing that this can do that none of them can is give you 3D with parallax. And what that basically is you can look at an image from different angles by moving your head position, and it'll be like you're looking at it as you would in real life. When you set something down on the table or a counter and you move around, you see it from different angles. With the Nintendo 3DS and other 3D devices of the past, if you move, the image won't change angles. It'll stay the same angle. You'll just be able to see, even though you moved your head position, it'll keep the 3D stable. But with this, you can actually view things from like a real angle as you move around. One thing I need to say though is that does not 100% work with everything by default. That feature actually has to be actively utilized by the content in order for it to activate and function that way. If it is not a video or 3D model or a game that has been developed or produced with that feature in mind, you'll still just get that traditional kind of head tracking where you move around and the 3D image stays stable no matter where you put your head. But with that parallax feature, there are certain things that are compatible with it. You can move around and see things from a true angle, which is incredible to see on this tablet. One other thing about the head tracking is that the viewing angle is limited. So you have 86 degrees of freedom to work with your head position, which is actually plenty. It's way more than enough from what I've experienced. I think I've hardly ever encountered a situation, even once, where I moved my head position by accident outside of the viewing angle range because it supports such a wide viewing angle. Like right now I'm getting this image in 3D, and if I tilt it all the way over here, now the effect breaks. So you have a super wide angle to work with, and it's also cool because it works diagonally too, so you can rotate up to 45 degrees in either direction and the 3D image will remain stable and it'll keep tracking your head position. You can tilt it up and down pretty steeply, and it'll also keep that 3D effect working. And then distance-wise, plenty far, I can hold it at full arm's length and I'm still getting a beautiful 3D image directed right at me that's still tracking my head position as I move it around. You can hold the tablet like this and move the tablet relative to your head. It will still track your head position. You can also move your head position relative to where the tablet is, and you'll get different views, or you'll be able to view the angle no matter where you position your head. The other thing about this is the actual 3D depth. In the front of the display, in terms of pop out for this thing, you're getting a solid 3 to 4 inches out of the front of the display. And then the depth back into the display is probably, I would say, about this far at a minimum. So you're getting a good 6+ inches of depth inside of the display. And when combined, you have a really immersive effect because you have stuff coming quite a bit out of the display and then going way back into it. So it feels like with this level of resolution, you're kind of looking into a window with some of that coming into your space or your world at the same time. That's the feeling it gives you. It's almost like a hologram. It's really surreal to experience, and it's incredibly immersive. When you're actually dealing with good content that is designed with a good 3D setup and 3D resolution, it looks beautiful. It looks stunning on this display. And the actual resolution in 3D is more than double what the original Lume Pad was at 640 by 400 per eye. That puts this roughly at 1280 by 800 per eye, which is what it feels like when you're looking at images in 3D. You hardly, if at all, notice any pixelation in 99% of situations. There may be certain cases where I notice it, but it doesn't even bother me in those situations because the effect overall is so immersive, and then I'm drawn right back into whatever I'm doing. So the 3D resolution is critical crystal clear. If you try, you can see pixelation. It is almost next to unnoticeable as you're just using it normally. One of the most common reactions I get from people when I show them this display is they say, it looks like it's right there, like I could reach out and touch it. And that's no exaggeration. The images really are that good on this display. Now there are a couple pitfalls, certain things that could happen when you're using it that you got to be aware of. One of those things includes crosstalk or ghosting. It's kind of like double imaging. So if you take a photo or you're viewing something that wasn't taken or produced correctly on the Lume Pad 2, you might get some double imaging. With photos at least on this thing, you can easily fix that. If you open up the editor, you can slide this up and down to adjust the ghosting so that you align it perfectly so that your image is in completely beautiful, perfect 3D. You can completely eliminate the double image effect for most things using this method. The one exception to that is when there's high contrast and high disparity. This display isn't really capable of eliminating crosstalk for those situations, so you're gonna get crosstalk and it's really hard to get rid of it. Thankfully, most of the things you're gonna find on this tablet and the content, the software, the images and everything is not gonna be like that. You may encounter it occasionally. I would say you can just ignore it and enjoy all the other things that don't suffer from those issues. But it is one of the things that I hope in future devices, in future hardware, we see an improvement to the display that's going to completely eliminate that crosstalk issue. The other thing is glare. So I don't know if you can see, but there's pretty bad glare on this screen. This display, even in 2D mode, struggles a bit with glare, and when you're outside, if there's sunlight, it's a bit unbearable. It's hard to see the 3D image at all in 3D when there's sunlight hitting the screen. I mean, it's kind of a problem with phones and things in general, but it's best when you're using this tablet to try to avoid bright light. And if you're outside, keep your back to the sunlight or stay in the shade, then you'll have a much better experience overall. It's definitely not even close to a deal breaker, or really even a big problem in my opinion, but it is noticeable and something that you gotta keep in mind when you're using this tablet. The other thing is brightness. When you're watching videos in particular, when you swap back and forth between 2D mode and 3D mode, you'll notice a drop in the brightness of the screen. So it gets dimmer when you're watching in 3D. This for me is something that you hardly notice because the 3D effect is so cool. If you're watching anime or a movie or something in 3D, for example, it's so immersive, just beautiful to watch in 3D that having it go down a little bit in terms of the brightness, like get a little bit dimmer once 3D mode kicks in. Most of the time, I don't even notice it at all because I get immediately pulled in by the crazy 3D effect that kicks in when I'm watching something in 3D. 3D model viewer, all these things look plenty bright. It's just that if you compare the 2D brightness to the 3D brightness, when you go into 3D mode, there is a bit of dimming that happens. So that's another thing that you gotta be aware of. Other thing that I love as a hardware addition to this tablet is the fact that it has face recognition, so Face ID unlock. It has a Touch ID built into this power button right here. When you start up your tablet, it'll have you scan your fingerprint, and then you can use Touch ID to unlock your tablet. You can also use a password, or like a puzzle to unlock. So there's so many different ways to unlock your screen, including Touch ID and Face ID. And I love having all of those options. My personal favorite is the Touch ID. I wish more devices still included it. Having all of them gives you the most flexibility. If you take a look right here, actually, there's a micro SD card slot. So this is amazing for a tablet like this. If you want to have a lot of 3D files and videos stored on here, your storage capacity is limited with the Lume Pad 2. It's 126 gigs. It's really not that much at all. You'll fill it up right away for downloading a bunch of 3D models, saving all your beautiful 3D photos taken on these cameras, and then if you're downloading videos or importing them from other devices, you'll fill that up quick. But having a micro SD card slot here, it supports up to 2 terabytes of micro SD card storage. Those 2 terabyte micro SD cards aren't even out on the market yet, but once they release, it'll be compatible with them. There are already 1 terabyte micro SD cards available, so you can use those. Just buy a couple of them and you should have plenty of storage to cover all the different types of media and things you want to experience in 3D on this tablet. If we look at the bottom of the tablet, it has these pogo pins here, so this is compatible with the Lume Pad stand. You can purchase a stand for this, it'll prop it up and then charge it kind of wirelessly at the same time. To be honest, I've never felt a need for it. I own one. It's incredibly heavy, and I think that was done intentionally so that it remains stable. It's just the right way to prop up the device. You can use the case and charge it at the same time. This case alone fulfills the purpose to me of setting the tablet and viewing something in 3D. So I've never used the stand to prop it up because it is insanely heavy. Maybe some people would. Personally, I've never seen the need to use that stand. There could be future hardware that makes use of the pogo pins at the bottom to provide kind of accessories or peripheral devices that you can use with the Lume Pad 2 to have really cool interactive experiences. And I'm hopeful that some hardware developers out there will see the potential there and combine that with some really cool 3D interactive stuff. Volume controls are right here next to the power button. It's not 2 separate buttons, it's just one tab and you click to the left or the right of it to increase or decrease the volume. And then the speakers are a Dolby atmospheric speaker system. You got 4 speakers on the device here that are Dolby atmospheric speakers, and it produces really powerful sound in crisp audio quality. So I think the sound on this thing is amazing, and a lot of the time it's almost too loud. Like the lowest volume setting on this thing is almost too loud. It's not even low volume, so I often have to go to YouTube and decrease the YouTube volume slider while having this on the lowest volume settings so that it's not disruptive volume, or just to keep it low enough where I don't feel like it's too loud. But if you want a little bit louder volume or loud volume, this is plenty good, and it's good immersive quality audio. Visually and audio-wise, this tablet is extremely solid. That's pretty much it in terms of the hardware side of things that I can think of for this tablet. Now I want to walk you through all the awesome software that comes packaged with this thing when you buy it. From day one, the moment you unbox it, you have a ton of stuff to experience in 3D. But the first thing I want to show you is the 3D that you can create for yourself immediately using the 3D cameras. You take photos and videos with the stereo cameras built into this thing. You do all of that using the app called Leacam, right here. The moment you open it up, you'll notice that it's in 3D mode as you're taking a video or photo. So right now this is in 3D. I can see this Lume Pad 2 box, and it looks like I'm looking at it for real. It looks like I could reach in here and pull it out of my tablet. So I can snap a picture like that, and then once you take a picture, it'll appear on the bottom right here. It gives you a little icon of the picture you just took. You click on that, it'll take you right to your 3D picture. You can confirm how it turned out. But the cool thing is that you see it in 3D when you're taking it, so you pretty much know exactly how it's gonna look once you save the picture in 3D like this. And once it's taken, you can zoom in and out in 3D mode by pinching like this. So I can look at any little detail in 3D and then double tap to have it fill the screen again. And when you're zoomed, you can move around, toggle 3D mode on and off, and then go right back to the camera by hitting that back button. What's going on here as a whole is on the left-hand side, you have this meter which shows you what level the autofocus is at. Sometimes the autofocus doesn't do a perfect job, so what I like to do is to tap the focus button and go into manual focus mode. It'll change to an M, and here I can slide this up and down to adjust the level of focus so that it perfectly fits in 3D the object that I want to focus on when I'm taking my picture. And then if I take it, it'll turn out perfectly, and I can see that because I'm adjusting the 3D focus in real time in 3D mode. It also works with video. You click here, you'll be able to do the exact same thing. I can see 3D video in 3D as I'm taking it from different angles. No matter how I move it, it's tracking my head, so I can move the tablet to the left and right, up and down, and I can see this in clear 3D as I'm doing that. During video recording mode, you can also zoom in and out, so it'll capture those motions, zooming in and out in your 3D video output. One thing that you gotta pay attention to though is that when you're setting the 3D focus here, if you set it in the camera mode, and then switch over to video mode, it'll go back to autofocus by default. So you have to reset the manual focus. When you're swapping back and forth between modes, you have to reset the manual focus. But the great thing is, once you set the manual focus to the perfect level, you can move the tablet around any way you want for as long as you want, and it'll hold that position. So if you're in the photo taking mode, you can snap a bunch of different photos all at once from different angles. It'll lock the focus to that level, so you get perfect 3D results for everything in that scene as you snap a bunch of pictures, and then you can adjust it to a different level and take more, giving you a really uninterrupted photo taking, video taking experience that's perfect for 3D. The other amazing thing is that it takes 3D selfies. So if you hit this button, it'll reverse the camera. So now I'm seeing myself in 3D. I can zoom in and out to get my face in 3D. If I hold my hand here, it's like my hand is sticking out of the screen at me, coming right back at me. It's so cool to kind of experience this feeling. But if you're with a friend or pet or anything, you can snap selfie photos this way in 3D, and even take selfie videos and zoom in and out again and do all the same things in selfie mode using the front stereo camera or the rear camera and toggle back and forth between them. Maybe from time to time you might feel like it's a little bit of a hassle to try to, pay attention to all this 3D stuff on the go. If it's a hectic scene you're trying to take videos or photos, you click on this on the bottom left. You can switch over to a 2D view. It's still capturing in 3D, whether it's a photo or video. You're just getting a 2D screen, but what you get instead is a 3D depth estimator on the upper left here. So you can see with this, it shows you a green outline. If it thinks it's at the perfect level of distance to give you beautiful depth on this Lume Pad 2, it'll be green. And if you go up too close, it'll start to get red. So it gives you kind of an idea. When you're too far away, it'll turn blue. So it tells you too much depth, too little depth, just the right amount of depth. It's a really handy feature to have. Thing to be careful of with this is that there's no way to edit your video ghosting or crosstalk or the double imaging after you've taken a video. If you're using this autofocus 2D preview mode for video, you're kind of dependent on the tablet taking a good video for you, because once you've taken it, you can't go back and edit it to align the 3D manually using any of the software that's available yet. I really hope that they add that feature in the future. I think it's a pretty important one to have. Since this has such a great video camera, it's a bit disappointing that it doesn't include that feature. Thankfully, as I just showed you, for photos it does. So if you happen to take a photo that's misaligned because you're using this 2D preview and you're trusting it to do a good job, relying on the depth estimation preview, you can go in right away after you've taken the photo and then just edit that, and you can adjust the focus to align the 3D perfectly. For anything that comes off, either way off or slightly off, you can perfect it using the tools built into this tablet, which is awesome. Another thing I like about this 2D preview photo taking mode is that when you tap, you get a brightness thing here. So you can adjust the level of brightness, and sometimes I find that making it brighter for the photo or video actually helps eliminate crosstalk in certain situations. So if there's certain patterns and things and you take a photo and you realize, this is a tricky one, there's crosstalk, I don't know how to get rid of it, try doing this. Go to the 2D preview camera mode, increase the brightness a bit, take a photo, and then take a look at it. A lot of the time it's actually going to help that issue a lot. You can also zoom in and out in this 2D preview mode, and then there are a couple other options on the upper right. You can turn flash on, so you can actually snap pictures with flash. That can give you some really cool results using this tablet even in the dark. With this flash, you can get some pretty good 3D results for photos even in dark environments. But that is another thing I just wanted to emphasize, which is you really want to make sure you're in a well-lit environment when you're taking photos with this tablet. There's a drastic difference in the quality of the images in 3D when you capture them in well-lit environments. Under direct sunlight, with actual natural lighting or bright environments, the results are so much better than if it's a dim environment. If you take pictures and videos in a dimly lit environment, the result kind of comes out a little bit hazy, almost looks blurred. It's not horrible in a lot of situations, but it just looks lower resolution. If you feel like the resolution isn't good enough, that's probably the reason. Try taking a photo again with good lighting, and you'll see that the results really pop and they come in crystal clear in beautiful 3D. Getting back to the head tracking for a second again, when you're using this tablet in any situation, it uses head tracking when 3D is on. The problem with that is that it requires light to see your head position. So when you're in a dimly lit environment, sometimes you can see that the tablet is struggling to keep up with your head position, and it might stutter or the image flickers because the head tracking is struggling to keep up with you. It's struggling to detect you, especially if you have the lights off. Then the only thing this tablet has to work with is the light that's produced by the tablet itself shining on your face, and sometimes that's not even enough. One of the most disappointing things for me is I will sometimes feel like I want to kick back, before bed and watch something in 3D on YouTube or a movie, and then I go to do that and the tablet, almost without fail, kind of loses track of my head position, and the 3D effect either stutters so violently or shuts off altogether that it makes it almost impossible to really enjoy that. You have to have a certain minimum level of light in the environment for it to stay stable enough for you to enjoy the 3D content on this tablet. I don't know if this is something that Leia can fix with future updates with the current hardware the way it is. I think it's possible, but there are probably some limitations, and I wouldn't expect too much from that. I would just try to have some sort of lighting set up in a dim-ish environment where you're able to enjoy the content you want to in 3D. That way, you're able to make it work within the limitations of this 3D tablet. But in decently lit environments or well-lit environments, the head tracking is very solid to really make a 3D future possible. And this tablet is knocking it out of the park with this stuff. One other issue with the video capture for this tablet is that you can't export in side-by-side format. It kind of forces you to keep all your videos in the Leia video format, like Apple does. It makes it difficult to use these videos outside of this ecosystem. I mean, if you're sending the Leia video format file to someone who also has a Lume Pad 2 or even a Lume Pad 1 and previous Leia devices, they'll be able to view it in 3D, no problem. You can transfer it to another Leia device that you have, no problem. But the moment you go and you try to share it outside of this ecosystem, it's almost impossible to just directly view it in 3D that way, even though it is a 3D file. You have to go through a lot of other steps to get it converted. I actually have a video showing you how to convert your videos into side-by-side format. You can check out that tutorial to see how you can get your Lume Pad 2 videos converted over to side-by-side so you can view them on your VR headset or your 3D TV or whatever device you have. Otherwise, they're kind of stuck in 2D outside of this device. You'll only be able to easily view them in 3D on a Leia device. One other issue is that the 3D video doesn't really keep up that well with fast-moving objects or fast-moving people. If you have stuff moving around and quick motions in the video, it won't capture it that well in 3D. It'll throw it off. And then even sometimes there's kind of like this ripple or wavy effect. It's like the processing power of this tablet can't quite handle the level of beautiful video it's trying to capture, which I think is really a big shame, because All the pieces are there, except for maybe that extra processing power or whatever is required to keep the tablet moving fast enough so that it keeps up with everything that's going on, which I find a lot of the time it just can't. That being said, if you have kind of a situation where not that much is going on, there's not too much fast motion, people are sitting still, that sort of thing, turns out amazing, just absolutely incredible in 3D. So this is still a really worthwhile video camera to have in 3D, but if you're trying to capture stuff that's in fast motion, you might be disappointed with the results, and it's not the best option for capturing things in 3D. Those are all the camera features. By far one of my most used favorite features of this tablet. It's so unreal to see things that you in real life see with your own eyes come to life again anytime just through the cameras built into this tablet.